If you haven't heard about Anchor, it is the easiest way to make a podcast. Please, let me explain. 1, it is free. 2, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from the phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many, many others. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It is everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So please, download the free Anchor app and go to anchor.fm and get started today.
The Ear, Evangelical and Reformed Christian Podcast. Welcome to The Ear, the Evangelical and Reformed, a Christian podcast that urges you to think deeper and draws you closer to God through faith. Through powerful sermons, teaching segments, and discussions, The Ear hopes to give you a different perspective on secular topics from a Christian worldview. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Please welcome your host, Brandon Queen.
Well. How's it going, podcast world? This is your boy, Brandon Queen, the podcast king, and we are back for another episode, episode 8, The Way Forward, with none other than Joe Barnard. So, Joe, it's been a pretty good weekend for me. I did nothing. How was your weekend?
It was good. Went crabbing with the kids, so that was a lot of fun, and had a good mixture of just some great time outdoors and more time with the family. So again, making the most of being isolated.
Did you catch crab? That did not sound right.
Yeah.
Did you capture any crabs?
We did. We got a few, so not as many as I would have liked, but I think, we had the same idea as about 100 other families. So by the time the crabs got to us, they were the strong, smart ones. So the hard ones to catch. Did
you boil them this weekend too?
We did. So we had a little, didn't have a whole, it was just a little bit of an appetizer.
All right. I love crabs. I just hate peeling them.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, all right, guys, we are on week 8. And if I am not mistaken, week 8 is entitled, we're going to get into the way forward. And this is part 1 of that,
so we're getting into the plan, man. We've done, we've thought about the problem. We thought about kind of the destination, so to speak. And this is the way forward. This is, okay, guys, what can you do to get out of a rut and get moving toward maturity? So we're getting practical now.
Yeah, absolutely. So to start it off, so we are entering the 3rd section of the book, which we already talked about. We're talking about the plan here. Mm-hmm. So the first question is this. The plan for what? Where is this book leading us?
Yeah. So I've already referenced it once, but this is the route to maturity. So, what we're going to be talking about, these aren't just like, in my mind at least, these aren't like a few bits of advice. This is, hey guys, like if you're stuck and if you are out there and you think, I want to be a man of God, literally serve with the resources God has given me. This is the stuff that is going to make a radical difference in your life. And so, the problem with a lot of books is there's all this information and it sounds great in theory, but you're left thinking, okay, but what do I do? And so, we want to move from that theory and just the ideas to action steps, into initially surveying a variety of things guys can do, but we're going to whittle that down all the way. By the time we get to the end, not today, but they'll find a week, we're going to be talking about, hey guys, literally, here's your next steps. So we're going to get as practical as we can.
Oh, perfect. So we're getting into those, what I like to call infancy stages of moving forward as Christian men. I like it. All right. So you give 7 pieces of advice in the final section of the book. And the first one is that men need to catch a better vision of glory. What do you mean by this?
Okay. So I would have guys think first about catch a better vision of glory. The assumption there is an important assumption, is that you already have a vision of glory. There is something, and we talked about captivation weeks ago, but there is something that has captivated your heart. And it could be any number of things. It might be, getting another degree. It might be earning more money that you can buy the boat or buy the car. It might be, joining CrossFit and getting, really lean and sculpted and, build muscle mass. Who knows what it is? But as many men as there are out there, every single one of them has a conception of glory, something they think, man, if I had this, that would give my existence worth. And so by catching a better vision, this goes back again to the idea of captivation. It's first thing, the most important thing is you've got to see something of God's holiness, of his glory, that flips those desires inside out, so that this becomes your way forward. This is what I want more. Not that you have to give up fitness, but this is better than fitness. And so I'd take less of that to have more of the other. That's what I'm talking about with a better vision of glory.
I would also ask this question too. The Bible does talks about God's grace being sufficient. Should men have a better vision of God's grace and the sufficiency of his grace?
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, that's because ultimately, if you're talking about someone like John Owen, the grace of God is synonymous with Jesus himself. Jesus is the gift. And so, what we're going to get into is just the idea of that if you want to see more of God, you need to see more of Jesus. I mean, that's where we come to know. So yeah, what God, who he is, but also what he has done. I mean, once you see the gap between you and God, not just the creational gap, but the sin gap, and then realize he's reached down and lifted you, not just out of the miry pit, but out of the basement of hell, then all of a sudden you think, okay, I got to rethink the universe, because this is something that I could never drum up in my mind. This is something that gives my life significance that is beyond my wildest dreams, that God would do that for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this is a follow-up from the last question. The one before the one I asked. So men need to catch a better vision of God's glory. So here's the follow-up question. How do men go about catching this better or this more perfect vision of God's glory? How would we do that?
Yeah, let's talk about three ways. So here's the first way. The first way is they need to slow down and meditate on Jesus. They need to behold who he is, what he's doing. And let's open up, our Bible. Let's look at a couple of verses to help guys understand why this is so significant. And the first one I want to go to is in 2 Corinthians, chapter 4, verse 6. And I'll give you a second to find that. But, Paul talks about the way in which the God of this age blinds the eyes, the heart of men, so that we can't see the glory of God. But what he goes on, and I want to read verse 6, he says, "For it is the God who commanded light to shine out of darkness, who has shone in our hearts to give the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ." Now that's a mouthful, but he says, okay, the same God that spoke light in the beginning, and there was light, he has shone in our hearts so that we can see something of his glory, and that comes through the face of Jesus. So if we're thinking, and it's hard for guys to do this, but God, the infinite measure of all that is good, all that is true, all that is glorious and beautiful, everything that has ultimate value. If we want contact, if we want knowledge of ultimately what's true, God himself, then it is the face of Jesus that reflects that. So the more of Jesus we see, this is like, coming out of a cave and for the first time beholding the sun. We get to see this is the light that illumines and gives life to everything else. And so the first way guys can catch a better vision is you got to stop and look at Jesus. And I would recommend to guys to actually slowly pray their way through the Gospel of John. It's something that probably sounds foreign, but to slow down and just think And, John quickly gets so deep that you lose your touch at the bottom. You can't understand it all. But what John is trying to do is he's trying to reveal the divinity, the Godhead of Jesus as he's doing these miracles, as he's teaching. And it's filled with so many wonderful phrases. But, man, if you get the vision of glory as John is presenting it, again, that's going to change how you view everything else in your life. So that's the first way. I mean, do you want to pick up on anything before I move on to another way? So one way, again, slow down, meditate on the person of Jesus. Another way to catch a better vision of glory is I would encourage men to prayerfully study some theology. So A.W. Tozer, he famously said at the start of Knowledge of the Holy, he said, the most important thing about a person is what comes to their mind when they hear the word God. And if you stop and think about that, that's a really profound statement. In fact, I would hope that a lot of guys would have to wrestle with whether or not it's true, because at first you think that can't be true. Is that the most important thing to me? But Tozer's point is that if you distort God, you're ultimately distorting everything else in your worldview, everything else you hold true, because he is of utmost significance. And the degree to which, rather, you get him right is the degree to which you understand how this universe operates. You understand your own place. You understand who he is. And so, a lot of us, we just kind of go into church and we assume that, we have this kind of you just kind of know God like you learn to ride a bike. It just kind of happens. Rather than this is the most profound mystery ever revealed. And so, what we need to do as men is we have to actually find faithful guides. So, that book on Tozer is one of them. You can find J.I. Packer's classic, Knowing God, those kinds of books that, introduce us. Okay, what is holiness? What is justice? What is the mercy of God? What is the grace of God? What is, the incomprehensibility of God? What is the, the purity of God, the majesty of God? These concepts that they're not just concepts, they're truth. And we need to know God if our hearts are going to be actually, operate according to the truth of this universe, which he has created. So that would be the second way.
Right. Real quick, before you go to number 3. You have in the book, and I kind of went to your the section 8, the questions at the study guide. If you do this as a group, it says that read the classical hymn "When I Survey." And when you were talking earlier, and I read that, I'm like, wait, that's perfect. That's a perfect example. Whenever somebody surveys something, or if you think of a surveyor, they go out there with their camera and they're shooting lines and they're studying, a piece of property or something, or getting the angles and the math right. We need to do the same thing with the Bible. We need to study it as if it's something that we can get more information out of, which we can every single time we read it. So when we survey this book, it shouldn't be, Nehemiah says this. Okay, cool. No, we need to sit there and gnaw on it, chew on it, and understand it, and, make it part of our lives.
Yeah. And let's look at another passage that gets what you brought up with the idea of surveying, because Paul describes something very similar in Ephesians chapter 3. And I'll give you a second to find that, verse 14. I mean, it's wonderful all the way to the end of the chapter, but we'll read down to verse 19. It's one of these really long sentences of Paul that, he just can't stop piling thought upon thought. But it's right in line with what we're talking about. So starting in verse 14, chapter 3, he says, "For this reason I bow my knees to the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, from whom the whole family in heaven and earth is named." So he's talking about a prayer. He's praying to God the Father. Now, what is Paul praying for? He's going to tell us, verse 16, that he would grant you according to the riches of his glory to be strengthened with might through his Spirit in the inner man, that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, that you may be rooted and grounded in love, may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the width, the length, the depth, the height, to know the love of God which passes knowledge, that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. I mean, this is the ultimate request all of us need to be praying for. is that God would just explode the dimensions of our mind so we can begin to not comprehend